a expert randomizer player and Nickelback music video star.
It really is incredible.
He will be facing simpoldood, who is, I believe, the best Zelda 2 player. And he's been getting into this game some. A lot of the Zelda 1 and Zelda 2 players have been getting into this game. And that's really fun to see. And then in the bottom left, we have ChristosOwen, who is a tea enthusiast and our favorite Brit in the A Link to the Past community for sure. And he'll be facing Darkmagician, who's been improving a lot at this game lately. So
Darkmagician is the inventor of one of my least favorite strategies in the randomized version of this game. Christos, also known for a really unsettlingly strong obsession with baked beans. He puts them on everything. And we should all keep him in our thoughts. It's concerning.
Yeah, the first time I heard about them eating them for breakfast, like, just eating them for breakfast at all is weird. But B, like, putting them over their eggs and toast is especially strange. Like, it just seems like the complete wrong combination of flavors.
I am inclined to agree. Meanwhile, as we've been having a little bit of fun at the expense of our runners, they are all making their way down into the dungeon of Hyrule Castle. And actually, the top race is more or less synced right now, and the bottom race is more or less synced, so we've got a couple of good matches off to the start here.
Wow, Willard already grabbing a heart. Really wanting to play safe, probably. Escape is really awful to die in.
Yeah, it's one of those deaths that, almost never happens, and so you tend to play a little bit aggressively, especially, for some reason or another you decide to go for the faster text in Sanctuary, but when and if you do die in there, the restart points are not the friendliest, although they are friendlier than most. Yeah, it can be very punishing.
Looks like they're all taking down the most dangerous part of Escape right there with that ball and chain guard. Any of his attacks getting hit by the ball and chain or just touching his sprite will do a full heart of damage, which is a lot of your health with just 3 hearts here. So getting through that's a nice hurdle to cross.
Absolutely, especially with that 8/ strat, you're definitely right in the line of fire. To get the optimal time there, you are well within the hit range for his ball and chain if you haven't positioned yourself just right.
They'll be making their way with Zelda towards the sewers section. Can be kind of annoying. There's a lot of like subtle randomness to the way the rats and the snakes move that can throw you off if you're not good at reacting to them.
Definitely. I know in that first room, occasionally you get that RNG where there's that rogue rat or snake, maybe that just decides to beeline for you from the top. And if you're not expecting that and ready to boomerang it, it can be punishing both time-wise and, I don't know, confidence-wise when you get bodied right in the middle of there.
Interesting thing about that shelf they moved out of the way to get into the sewers. game will actually not allow you to enter this area without the lamp. Zelda will just be like, no, you need a lamp. So I've actually seen people forget the lamp before, and it's never a good feeling getting that far only to be rejected.
Yeah, fortunately, it is 100% required to complete the second and third dungeons that we would be visiting. So it's not for nothing, but yeah, I have definitely made that mistake and restarted a run.
Looks like every runner got a good pattern from that key right there. It can go up in the top left corner, which is really annoying, and usually costs 1 or 2 seconds at least. But it was kind to all these runners here.
Yeah, for being such a relatively small time loss super early in the run, it's incredibly frustrating when that key rat goes up there. It feels like a lot longer than 1 or 2 seconds, I can say that.
Yeah. So, interesting thing here, I believe everyone is going to get this heart, except for maybe Chris. It's been a long time since Chris has gotten this heart in an NMG run. Yeah, and he skips it. So, that heart loses 3 seconds to get, but it's by far the best safety in the game. It's only 3 seconds for an extra heart container, so it's pretty good.
Yeah, I think, the biggest difference I feel with grabbing that heart really is in Pod, our first Dark World dungeon. Helmasaur can go rogue on you, and sometimes that extra heart, whether it's for getting through the dungeon on the way there and making a little mistake, or just having a little bit of buffer for one hit on Helmasaur, it's nice.
Yeah, as a player who recently has been trying to move on from it myself, there are definitely like a surprising number of areas throughout the run where I can like really feel not having it. Probably as late as Skull Woods even, where I'm just like, wow, it would be so helpful if I had it right now. But
definitely,
yeah, Pod's a big one. Hera's a big one with climbing Death Mountain and all the trouble that can cause. And also the segment they're on, Eastern, can be a lot harder. It's a lot, because they have a little trick coming up that's going to eat into their health some. So you don't have to be so careful with the Sanctuary Heart.
Yeah, it's definitely nice to, predictably not have to worry about there's two hearts in the room where they're going to be doing that aforementioned trick, and it's nice not to have to worry about grabbing them.
This category does not allow save and quit, and it does not allow death warping on the overworld, at least.
Right, in dungeons, since it's not actually ever a time save, because by the point where any of these runners are likely to do it, want to do it intentionally, they already have the mirror, which is objectively faster. But yeah, on the overworld, using it as a transportation method is definitely strictly forbidden.
Every player grabbing the 5 safety arrows on the right side of the bow room. You can skip them and save a second, but it makes the arrow route a lot tighter, and it also activates kind of a drop gamble towards the end of the dungeon that I guess none of these players really want to deal with. So Chris is coming up on big key skip, or I guess a puzzle skip rather, to get the big key. Where
it's a really nice damage boost over to the left too. That was really good looking. So for anybody who's not familiar with that little trick, what you're doing is getting hit by that popo, trying to get damage boosted over to the left near the switch, which is hidden under those 4 anti-fairies. And using the iframes from the popos, the invincibility frames, to actually walk in there, hit the switch, and get out. And if you do it properly, and it goes well, I believe you lose exactly a heart and a half of health every time that you do it. But Chris, unfortunately, getting a little bit messed up by the Igor there. He did recover nicely.
Chris demonstrating a little bit of game knowledge, going for that right pot that had a heart under it. I actually didn't even know that myself. That's something you don't see often.
Yeah, there's all sorts of little safeties, be they heart or magic, stuffed in all sorts of places. Arrows, unfortunately, are the one thing that, if things go even slightly not well for you, are pretty much always in short supply, so you can expect to see our runners going for a few little arrow pickups that are on the way throughout the run.
Yeah, and for anyone who's new to watching this game, all items under pots are predetermined. It'll always be the same. Enemy drops won't be, but stuff under pots is always going to be there. So these players have it all mapped out, and you'll see them as they move through desert. They'll want a good amount of arrows going into the Mola's fight. And you'll see them grab particular pots to restock.
Yeah, with the sword that they have in desert, each of the Lamb Molas takes, I believe, 4 arrows to kill, but 8 slashes with the sword. So arrows are definitely the preferred way to kill those things, but it does chew through your arrows pretty quickly, and it's very easy to miss.
And here we've got a little difference in the routing, potentially. Chris is definitely going for the tree rupees route that's fastest, and so is Dark Magician. It looks like Willard might... Yeah, he's going for the Sahasrara rupees. These are something like 6 or 7 seconds slower. It looks slower than it is right now, but Willard will gain some of that time back later in the run.
Yeah. The price you pay for that speed on going with the tree rupee route is really that, there are ways to screw it up, and there are backup trees that you would then have to pull to get those rupees, and every little backup that you have to engage, it's definitely more time because you're also killing enemies and doing all sorts of stuff. Chris actually skipping the spin speed there on the way to the library. I think that spin speed saves a very small amount of time if you get it perfectly. So for a race setting, going for maybe slightly more predictably good strats is potentially beneficial.
Looks like everyone else actually went for it.
Unfortunately, Willard taken a couple tries to make the spin speed happen, which is where all of that time really starts to disappear. There's a point where just dashing out of there might be the right call.
Yeah. The one leaving the library is a lot easier to do, even though it saves around the same amount of time. It's just the movement for getting... or for moving through the screen in that manner with super speed is just significantly easier to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the only real obstacle in your way is that little bush, and that's really not hard to dodge at all.
Yeah, exactly.
The movement on that screen that Willard and Simple were just dashing through is really shockingly finicky, actually. The difference between clipping the edge of the water slightly and not during the dash downward is pretty... It feels very significant time-wise. I'm not sure what the actual frame count difference is, but it's pretty particular to get it right.
Yeah, ordinarily Link dashes at 4 pixels per frame, but if you're moving through the tall grass or the shallow water, it actually is reduced by 25% to 3 pixels per frame, which, you might think, oh, that's just a pixel per frame, but it adds up over even, pretty short distances.
Definitely. One thing I noticed as these runners were entering the dungeon, you could see, I believe, a little bit of difference between, certainly on Chris's screen and on the top racer screen. A lot of people who don't run the game aggressively don't necessarily know but you can actually trigger the tablet that you open with the book to open this dungeon from really, really far to the left, which saves you a bit of time when you start moving up and heading into the dungeon. So it's something where, you know, occasionally you'll see somebody opening it from dead on, and yeah, it's definitely a place where you can save a few free frames if you can snag it.
We'll see if Chris or any of the other racers go for this spin speed right outside.
The spin speed scares me to death.
Yeah. Chris opting not to go for it, which is pretty wise. So I don't know if he's very fresh on the strat.
It's a pretty minor time save in the grand scheme of the run, too, for potentially a huge time loss.
Yeah, for sure. It only saves 2/3 of a second, and you risk losing like a minute. So, yeah. Unless you're very confident in it, you definitely don't want to be going for it. But Simple actually tried to do it, and so did Willard, actually.
Scary. You know, getting that, most people will pause buffer there to switch to the lamp to avoid jumping off the thing, but it's still terrifying.
Chris moving into the Wenmo fight. This fight is extremely difficult to do fast. Oh, wow.
Oh, that third Lambo just eluding him, unfortunately. Looks like it's going to be a low 4 cycle, I think, if I'm counting correctly. Yeah.
Yeah. You could have had a 3 there, but kind of messed up.
Yeah, Lambolus 1 is one of the first really, really, really big RNG-heavy components in the run. It can definitely save you or cost you a lot of time. You'll notice also all of our runners doing this bonk against the top wall and then usually edging up like 1 to 2 pixels. And that's really just about getting the lineup right so that you can safely shoot arrows into the first Lambola.
Chris will be headed to do a little trick we call fake flippers. He doesn't have the flippers yet, but you're going to see him swim to a whirlpool here. One of the few whirlpools... Ooh, getting crabbed. That's pretty bad. But yeah, this is one of the whirlpools on the overworld that will warp you. It's just a slightly faster route to get to Death Mountain. How he performs that trick is he jumps into the water, a pixel from the screen transitions as soon as he lands, and the game does not check for flippers on the new screen, so allows him to swim.
Yeah, there's a lot of tricks like that where you're doing something on one frame and something on the frame immediately after. I think the game does a lot of its state checks every like 4 frames, and things have different windows. So, I mean, yeah, I don't know. As Scudge once said, game's weird, man.
Yeah, exactly. You saw Chris getting hit out of his dash by a crab. Crabs are actually, I believe, the strongest enemy on the overworld and the light world. They do 2 hearts of damage, and as we mentioned before, he didn't get Sanctuary Heart. So he's in pretty deep trouble here. You can easily just die to a random boulder.
Absolutely, especially while going.
And there it is. Oops.
Yeah, that ladder that our runners are all going to be trying to get spin speed on, which is a pretty huge spin speed, time save wise, is literally right in the crossfire of pretty much every boulder that drops down Death Mountain on this left-hand side. So it's not fun. Plus, there's that dead rock there that loves to screw you again, which is a ton of fun.
Yeah, dead rocks are definitely in the running for worst enemy in this game. They're just extremely annoying and frustrating to deal with.
I like to think that there's an older game designer somewhere in Japan just cackling to himself for the last 25 years, just like, oh, I showed them.
We actually just saw it on Simple's screen where he got blocked. It's very easily, like, if they block, like, one of the diagonal, I guess, routes, it's very easy for them to just, like, completely block any way around them. And you just have to sit there and wait for them to unfreeze.
Yeah, Simple also playing it very safe, using, again, a little bit of that game knowledge. The old man, after you save him, will happily refill your health for you if you go talk to him. Unfortunately, he does have a little bit to say, so you lose a little bit of extra time to that text.
I did not actually see Chris get the boomerang dash here, but I can only assume that's what happened. That's a neat little trick that saves just a little bit of time, since he doesn't have to hit the switch in the next room.
Definitely. The other way to get on the other side of those blocks is usually, if you're a newer player and a little bit less confident, if you're doing the Sahasrara Rupee route, you can grab 3 bombs out of the back of his little hut and use them to trigger the switch as well. But that's definitely, it doesn't cost you any time in the tile room because that's a fixed length, but picking up that chest, it does have a text box, unlike the rupee chests, so it does cost a bit.
Chris skipping the safety switch with 2 hearts. Pretty risky.
Yeah, especially, I believe that switch actually, it reduces slightly the amount of time if you fall through some of Tower of Hera's infamous holes. And I don't know, that feels like a thing where I certainly would be hitting that switch in a race context, because just in case, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And Moldorm is, never a guaranteed thing. It's tough to do without taking damage.
Yeah, the Moldorm fight is really interesting. He's got a bit of random movement, but usually he's kind of predictable with it if you know how to read what he's doing. But it's very easy to get knocked off. There are ways to mitigate that with holding out your sword and pushing inward towards the arena and all that sort of stuff. But at no point are you 100% safe, and the penalty for falling, especially through that middle hole there, is pretty severe. That middle hole will drop you down 2 levels in the dungeon, and it is a huge time sink.
Dark Magician seemed like he had a pretty good fight. We'll see if Willard can get through it.
With simpoldood making his way up here, none of our runners messed up the Hera bomb jump, which is great for them.
Yeah, the bomb jump will also drop you 2 floors, just like Middle Hole Moldorm does. So it's pretty demoralizing to miss it.
I believe that's why Willard actually hit the little star tile before going for the bomb jump, just in case, because I believe that knocks it down to 1 floor of loss.
Yeah, that's an interesting safety.
Yeah, and Chris giving us a nice demonstration of just how long Link's arms are. For anybody who doesn't know, you can actually, you don't need to walk up on that thing to grab the Master Sword. You can grab it from pretty far back, and actually a little bit to the right of where Chris is, and it looks really funny when Link's arms break back away from the sword. Willard using lots of really, nice kind of slightly slower, but definitely more consistent strats. Trying not to, shoot an arrow up at that pickle who can sometimes evade it, and just going around to the right on his way to the Master Sword pedestal is potentially a pretty smart choice here.
I guess we should explain the tree rupees that all just happened. You'll see Dark Magician do the last bit of it here. Basically, they pulled a tree to get 5 blue rupees, and that's guaranteed 5 blue rupees by this point in the run, because they have killed more than 4 enemies, and they have taken damage, and that's always going to happen at this point in the run. But they pull that tree, and then from there the counters have been reset, and they can kill 4 enemies and not take damage to manipulate red drops from the second tree. But Dark Magician did get damaged, so he will have to use a backup here. And this doesn't cost that much time. Fortunately, there's a tree like right on the way, another tree here in the courtyard of the castle that he can pull. And there it is. He's got his backup.
Yeah, unfortunately, getting bodied a little bit by that last guard on the way into the castle. It's a really unfortunate place to take damage, actually, because the first 2 rooms in the Aghahnim's tower climb are substantially faster with sword beams as opposed to not.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Dark Magician also only has 8 arrows, so he's gonna probably be taking some slightly slower strats here in order to conserve his arrow count a bit.
He does kill those 2 knights in the second room with a sword spin, which means he risks getting his Turtle Rock Fairy at Hammer Jump. So we'll have to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, for people who are not aware of the prize pack situation, basically a lot of the enemies in this game are grouped into what we call prize packs. So they have a list of the things that they will drop, and that list is in an order, and more or less it just cycles through them. In this run, there are enemies we try to kill certain ways, and I believe it's that killing them with dashes does not actually advance the prize pack. So we're trying to kill certain enemies with dashes, predictably, that we have to kill, and not kill other enemies to manipulate that prize pack so that you get a fairy in Turtle Rock. And that allows you to play Turtle Rock much more aggressively and save a bit of time in a few rooms there.
Yeah, definitely. There's a damage boost early on in Turtle Rock that saves like 5 seconds. It's a really strong strategy, but, certainly a lot of players, even myself included, find it a bit tougher to go for if you're not guaranteed a fairy.
Yeah, so much of the time I end up just mirroring out. It's like I know the strat, but you get scared.
Yeah. So I haven't been counting Chris's blue balls.
I believe we've seen at least one since I started watching, but I am not 100% sure where he's at. And he, thank you, in chat pointing out, Willard actually did not pick up the arrows in the Circle of Pots room. It's a really easy one to miss if you're not thinking about it, but they're pretty important arrows to have heading into Pod. You've got mimics to kill, as well as an arrow statue you need to hit, and unless you have beams, you're using an arrow to manipulate a crystal switch. So missing those arrow pickups means he's going to have to farm a little bit in Palace of Darkness.
It's not too crazy to manipulate the fairy. You only encounter like a few enemies in that particular prize pack throughout the entire run. That prize pack, which I tend to call it like the premium prize pack because it just has all the best stuff. It has like a fairy, it has a full magic jar, it has 10 arrows, like it has an 8 bomb drop, like it just has like the max prizes for like every class of things. And there aren't too many enemies that belong in it. There's the fast guards in Aghanim's tower that like hold their sword / dagger very high. And there's the mini Helmasaurs, and there's the Pokies in Turtle Rock, and that's like all you encounter in the run.
I need to go back and check the room time spreadsheet. I know there's a couple strats for exiting the pyramid there. I gotta check which ones are actually the fastest.
Yeah, doing the spin speed is definitely the fastest. I get a little bit too. I think like a second and a half. But it's a little risky if you're not confident in your spin speeds for sure.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where if you miss the spin speed, then you start eating into that time pretty substantially. Plus, you have to worry about getting bodied by those enemies. Chris getting a pretty good little Kiki dash there. Not the tightest you can end up with it, but a pretty good one.
Yeah, and the thing with the Kiki dash is you want to you do a specific movement to sort of manipulate Kiki to get close to you before activating the cutscene. Because during the cutscene, Kiki moves very, very slowly. Maybe you'll see one of the runners not have such a great one, and see how slowly he'll move to jump on the Link's back.
Alright, and Chris is decently into his Palace of Darkness run here. This dungeon is one of the most, finicky dungeons to route here. There's a very particular route with making heavy use of the mirror for navigating this dungeon quickly. And there are a few things that the runners are going to be keeping in mind. One, this is literally where they acquire all of their bombs. For the run through, Misery Mire actually drops they get later notwithstanding. But it also contains one of the more finicky, the finicky bomb jump, really, that exists in the run. The rest are pretty straightforward vertical bomb jumps. This bomb jump you're going to see here is much more precise in positioning and in timing as well.
Yeah, they'll need to plant a bomb on a specific vertical position. And then they'll need to set Link on another specific vertical position. Oh no, and Chris fails it there.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he maybe just wasn't holding up or if he was actually on the wrong pixel. That's usually when you fail it pretty catastrophically. That was a very near failure.
Yeah, he might have been too far right. It's hard to tell what exactly went wrong there.
Yeah, it's, like I said, finicky.
And speaking of the usage of the mirror in this dungeon, it's actually one of the things I didn't really know back when I played this game casually for years. It's just like how good the mirror is, and that it can return you to the entrance of the dungeon.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think to discover that, back in 1991 or whatever, you kind of just would have had to use it on accident. Because I don't think it was in the manual anywhere either.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it was.
game is full of little fun things like that. I never, and you're never forced to. I never would have, thought about bonking my way across things, but it's 100% intended. And if you look at the bonus fairy room just before you start the GT gauntlet, there's the only way to get over there is with a bonk. So clearly, it's an intended mechanic.
Chris doing the turtle room. Looks like he did it well. Room can be pretty hard, especially when one of the bottom turtles just randomly moves away from you. Or sometimes even both of them can.
Yeah, there's always one for me that loves to shoot out down and right at like Mach 5.
Yeah. The turtles are an enemy who, Scud just told me this before, just have completely broken AI. Like, their intended code doesn't work properly, which leads to them doing strange things, like randomly meandering away from Link at high speeds.
Game's weird, man.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things the hackers and people who can read the code have told me. Another thing Scudge told me is that Mothula has, like, some code in there for, like, making the fight work in a completely different way, where you would use the fire rod to stun it, and then you would use the sword on him while he's stunned.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, and, that's not the case at all in the game, of course.
Yeah, so Chris had a pretty good Helmasaur fight. Willard making his way through the 17 hits necessary to break this mask right now, and Dark Magician right behind him. Willard showing off some little hammer hit strats. The hammer hitbox is notoriously small. So holding out his sword there to extend it upwards slightly, and then positioning himself just so that he can get in there and hit him with the sword in his little head jewel without taking damage, and getting a pretty clean fight out of it. Helmasaur is definitely one of those early deciders in a run. He has some pretty punishing movement RNG options that come with really obnoxious fireballs, and it's very easy to take an unplanned death there.
Yeah, and every single attack he has 2 hearts of damage, so can be pretty rough for sure.
Yeah, when you're on a PB pace run and he shoots right down to the bottom of the screen and pins you, and then simultaneously shoots out the tail and fireballs, you get very, very sad very, very quick.
Yeah, for sure. Now we have players proceeding to the Overworld segment for Thieves Town. This is probably one of the hardest Overworlds in the game. Like, there's just a lot of tough screens. The screen Willard and Dark Magician are on right now can kill you almost if you're not careful. There's the bird, and there's that Snapdragon at the end. They hit really hard, so you have to be careful.
Willard getting bodied on the bridge here. Usually what runners will do to try and improve their consistency there is move down a little bit upon entering that screen, which gives you just a little bit more buffer to get past those guys safely and hammer dash before you have to deal with them.
There's also a little mechanic called quick warping, where if you warp between the light world and dark world on certain horizontal screen coordinates, you can get a faster warp animation. So that's why Chris deliberately stepped into that warp tile from the left. Like, if you were just trying to step into it as fast as possible, you'd probably do it from the right, since you approach it from the right. But turns out it's faster to do that, because that's where the quick warp is for that particular warp tile.
Yeah, I want to say that saves almost half a second. I think it's like 24 frames or something like that.
Yeah, each quick warp saves half a second about, so then they add up. If you get all of them compared to getting none of them, it's like 12.5 seconds or something over the full run. Some of them are very hard to do, though. Any of them you do with the mirror can often be pretty tricky.
Yeah, I find the Swamp Palace one to be the most finicky.
Yeah, the swamp one's pretty difficult. The one at the castle gate is pretty hard too.
Yeah. So you see Willard going to go turn in his magic mushroom to receive his magic powder. ChristosOwen and Dark Magician both opted to skip powder. Chris getting the lineup for what we call the God Pixel here in the Hellway, but unfortunately, even when you get it perfect, the RNG can still make it impossible to get through that room optimally.
Chris got bad RNG in that room with the little grasshopper enemy crossing in front of him, but he read it well and decided to kill him.
Yeah, those little grasshoppers they're no joke.
Yeah.
They do a lot of damage relative to your armor class at this point. I mean, it's worth pointing out everything in the Dark World is terrifying with green mail. So, definitely a fairly high amount of skill required to, you really want to avoid everything to avoid getting sniped in the Overworld. Overworld deaths are very, very costly.
Shoutouts to Blunt Bunny on Dark Magician stream. Okay. The little star enemies, I don't know what to really call them, can turn you into a bunny if you touch them, which is pretty awful because the bunny is completely useless. But for our players who've gotten powder, which I think Willard has it now, I think Dark Magician actually skipped it though.
He did, yeah, he went straight into Thieves.
With powder, you can turn those little bunny rings into a fairy, which is very useful.
Yeah, outside of the Sanctuary Heart, I would actually say that the powder is one of the most the biggest impact safety items that you can get in this game. A few of the hardest dungeons have ample opportunities to powder things. Both the basement of Mire and Turtle Rock has several opportunities to do that.
Chris having a nice blind fight. Most sub 130 players have that fight pretty much solved. It should go the same way every time.
Chat pointed out that apparently those things actually are just called rabbit or bunny beams. So there you go.
Yeah, that's pretty simple. I like bunny beam more because it's alliterative.
I agree.
And who calls it the rabbit? Like, oh. No, in the speedrun community, we never call Bunny Link Rabbit Link.
He looks more like a bunny than a rabbit anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, as Josh was pointing out, most runners will have that blind fight pretty much solved. It is actually a scripted fight. So assuming you do everything the same way, so will he. So if you come up with a strat that works and you, and there are a few, you can get through it exactly the same way every time. Unfortunately, his pattern is based on him starting at a particular point in the room. And if you do take a death there and come back, he does not start at that point in the room. Neither do you. So it, or actually it's your position in the room. Sorry, I misspoke there. But his pattern will suddenly be very different. You actually have to do the fight the sort of expected way, which is no fun at all. And at this point, Willard is actually more or less a dungeon, like a thieves' town ahead of simpoldood. They were tracking incredibly closely throughout a lot of the White World, but it seemed like right around Aga Tower was when they kind of split apart.
Chris getting the Tempered Sword, which is actually a surprisingly big upgrade from the Master Sword. Makes pretty much every boss from here on out way easier.
Absolutely. Chris also deciding not to go for the fence dash coming out of the Tempered Sword sequence. He might just not want to go for it right now.
He might have forgotten how to do it since he hasn't run NMG in so long.
It's entirely possible.
Yeah. He's been known to forget a few things.
The big thing with that dash is that it's a pretty precise little dash nudge before the dash begins, and it's like a single pixel dash buffer or whatever. But the big thing is just recognizing when you don't get it, so that you can cancel your dash before you bonk.
Is Christos not going to get the fire rod?
It's the bold choice. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Oh man, that's pretty good.
That is a new one on me. I've not seen that particular error made, but I'm having fun.
Yeah.
Poor Chris.
Yeah, he's had a long day with the Key Sanity finals and stuff.
Yeah, I think it's very easy. You know, I mean, we have a lot of players who also play the Link to the Past randomizer, and it's no joke. One of the hardest things to do actually is transition between playing the randomizer and playing NMG in rapid succession. The way that you think, the way that you approach chests, you know, everything is completely different. And yeah, I don't blame Chris for maybe thinking he had an item that he didn't have.
Yeah, it's definitely a hard thing to do. But that little mistake does get some time back to Dark Magician, assuming he doesn't do any similar mistakes.
Definitely, and a fairly substantial amount of time actually. He made it all the way outside and had to pay for a few screen transitions and a lot of not super fast movement, so definitely an unfortunate one.
Ooh, Dark Magician playing that bomb just a little too far from the pit to get boosted over. Chris with a nice moth fight.
Yeah, very, very nice. That fight is one of those fights in this game, kind of like Kholdstare, where if you're in control of it, it's really, really easy, and if it gets away from you, it becomes a nightmare very, very quickly. But Chris doing a really good job of getting it done before the room starts joining in on the fight.
Yeah, when the spikes start to move around, it gets rough fast. Like, it's just really hard to do. The nice thing about Moth in comparison to Kholdstare, though, is that if you die to Moth, you take like 40 seconds getting back. And if you die to Kholdstare, you take a lot more than that to get back to Kholdstare, so...
Yeah, in addition to the dungeon crawling time, you've got to go find some magic. There's no way to enter that Ice Palace dungeon without Chris... Or Willard, sorry, getting wall mastered there. Fortunately, he did pick up the key before he got grabbed, so it's a relatively minor time loss in the grand scheme of things.
Dark Magician is very low on hearts here. If he touches Moth at all, he will die. Or Moth's little beam attack will also kill him. 2 spikes will kill him. He's pretty thin ice here.
Yeah, unfortunately, he was a little bit late to get the double hit off the dash. So he's going to have to go for 3 hits here. Oh, and there's the death.
Yeah, that's rough. He'll have to figure out something for magic, because he will have to go through Mummy Hellway again and light the 4 torches.
Yeah, there are a couple small magic pots in this star tile room. Interestingly, he's not going to pick them up, so it looks like he'll be maybe doing some spin attacks on these mummies here, hoping... Oh, well, there you go.
Yep, that's nice.
Yeah, you don't always get that full magic drop, but when you do, it's pretty sweet. Chris showing off the quick warp there after getting the Quake medallion from the catfish. You'll see a lot of runners doing a bonk off the right side ledge in that area, and that's because those quick warps that Josh had mentioned earlier, that bonk will actually line you up perfectly for the quick warp there. So all you have to do is walk straight up, grab your medallion, and hit the mirror.
Yeah, it's pretty simple to do, but I will caution any newer player that when you go for it, make sure that when you dash right, you're going to bonk and not hit the slope above it. Because if you hit the slope, you're in for a bad time, potentially.
I've never ever done that, and I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, if you dash into the slope above the wall, you can get stuck in a loop of jumping in the water. It's no good.
Yeah, you may have seen Chris showing off some of the neat movement things you can do in Zora's Domain. Actually, there are a fair number of tiles that look like deep water, but are not. They are wise, and so you can actually dash quite far off of the visible shallow water and save a few frames that way. Fortunately, Chris managed to enter Ice Palace with sword beams. You really want sword beams for that first room where you have to kill that jelly. Without sword beams, you're almost necessarily going to be spending a good deal more time in there. You can kill them with the sword, which requires walking around on the ice, or you can kill them with the fire rod, but they are the type of enemy that burns. So you have to wait for a bit to let that complete.
Ice is, to me, a pretty tough dungeon. Probably the toughest in the Dark World so far. It just throws, room after room is hard. Yeah,
there are a lot of hazards in the run. A lot of pretty most runners at a competitive level definitely have them down, but there are a few really finicky rooms, including this bomb jump that you'll see all of our runners do, which literally skips like 3/4 of the dungeon. But even that spike room with the switch, the bomb room with the 2 Stalfos, and even the bomb drop room where they bomb through the floor can be really, really finicky, especially if you go for that 2-bomb strat, so you don't have to hit the switch later in the spike room.
Yeah, and any room with ice physics can be tough to navigate quickly, just because ice physics don't make a whole lot of sense, and they definitely take some getting used to.
Yeah, and there are very weird behavioral things in the game with hitting diagonals along with either the sword or the hammer or even dashing, I think, actually.
Yeah.
So you'll see a lot of runners trying to get some very, very, very shockingly fast movement on that ice, but it can get away from you very quickly.
Yeah, there's this especially weird thing with ice where if you're like holding a direction and then you use an item, and while the item's animation is going on, you switch to another direction, that's when you see like really good speed boosts, and the good players will use that to their advantage pretty well, but it can get away from you pretty easily because you can get to where you're moving very fast.
All right, so Willard about a dungeon behind Chris right now, actually. They are not racing. They're in 2 separate races, but still, I'm feeling Willard's going to feel pretty good about that, actually, when he watches this back. Because there's a substantial amount of time in between their 2 PBs, so you got to feel good when you're kind of hanging. Willard making it through his Ice Palace bomb jump pretty nicely. Getting that room really optimal is actually really tricky. You need to get the bomb jump incredibly quickly so that you have time to hammer dash down. And it's pretty tricky, so he just kind of walked down.
Oh no, Dark Magician missing the bomb jump. He only has 1 bomb left.
Yeah, he knows this is gonna have to count here. And it looks like he's gotten a little bit nervous.
Yeah, this is really tough trick. As soon as it gets away from you. He's got it here though. But he still needs to be careful with just that 1 heart.
Oof. Yeah.
Oh no. He almost got hit in the pit there. That would have been bad.
This is one of those situations where there is actually an opportunity to powder in here. What happened to Willard while we weren't looking?
That's a good question. He must have died to Kholdstare, right?
That's just about the only thing I can imagine would have happened, although he fortunately was able to get some magic, so...
Yeah, he will need to get back to full magic, though, and he didn't opt to farm the penguins in that first room. So hopefully he gets the magic later in the dungeon. It can be it can be a little bit risky to hope for it in just the 1 room.
Yeah, I think in this situation, especially in a race setting, grabbing every magic drop you see, it's definitely not a bad decision.
Oh, Dark Magician misses his last shot.
Oh no. He also He's actually standing up at the very top pixel of the room where the ice will not actually damage you when it falls. Showing off one of the safety strats that people will often use if the fight, goes a little bit squirrely and they need to have a little bit of extra safety.
I'm not sure if he's going to continue or.
Yeah, so nobody has forfeited yet. He may just be taking a minute to, consider how he feels.
Yeah.
Which honestly might be a smart play. I think, he had a few things early in the run, and that Ice Palace bomb jump. You could tell he was a little bit shaken after that, which I don't blame him for at all. And so I think just, taking a minute to collect yourself is oftentimes better than trying to power through.
Also, I think if I were him here, I would actually die rather than mirror. Because that one heart's not really going to cut it for getting back through ice.
Definitely.
Willard's second Kholdstare try goes really well. It always does.
Yeah, but it's always easy peasy right after you take a death. The game knows. So while we were looking at some of these Kholdstare shenanigans, Chris looks like he's had a pretty decent swamp, actually, and showing off a little bit of movement that you can do on the hookshot big chest platform to get a really fast hookshot to the pot on the right-hand side. And you kind of get so instinctive about it. He actually did the initial movement even after having gotten the hookshot when he went back up a second time. Oh, simpoldood went for the poke dash, but unfortunately got bodied after the first one and is now in a bit of trouble. Getting hit by Kholdstare himself, is certainly possible, but the real rogue element in this fight is those ice explosions that drop down on you. They can be really hard to predict, especially when you're focused on not getting hit and hitting the puffballs. But he does clutch it out with a heart and a half, so well done.
Yeah, one interesting thing here is Willard taking that death. Simpoldood's probably not much more than a minute behind Willard right now. So, if Willard dies anywhere else, who knows what happens.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely... anything could happen here. Willard... Yeah. By and large, is a pretty consistent player at his skill level, but as we've seen, anything can happen, and there are still a couple of bosses that can go squirrely on you, and there's always Turtle Rock. That Chain Chomp room can equalize a race like this in a hurry.
Yes, definitely. Also, Willard doing sort of a safer thing here with getting the Ether Medallion and the Ice Rod during this segment of the run. You'll see Chris, who just finished Swamp, he'll be getting it for the Mire segment coming up. And the difference is, and you might see it on Chris's screen, he'll be able to do what we call sword climbs, where when you're on a ladder, if you hold B and press Y and A together with the hook shot, you can climb stairs really fast. But it actually only amounts to about something like 2/3 of a second. So it's not a big save. And oh, he misses the duck.
Those miss flutes like that are actually not the worst thing in the world, but they're surprisingly costly. Fortunately, missing the duck is a good bit faster than fluting to the wrong location, which again, I don't know anything about and I've never done. And you can see Chris finally got that sword climb. He got it a little bit late. He was a little bit over halfway up the staircase before he finally got it to trigger. It's a definite balancing act between you want to keep moving, you don't want to sit still and waste time trying to get a glitch, but getting it eventually is definitely nice.
Also, it looks like Dark Magician will be continuing, which is it's tough to do. I died to Kholdstare in my first tourney race, and it's just like, man, it's tough to motivate yourself to play after a Kholdstare death.
Most
definitely. Props to Willard for continuing too. It's just really annoying. Dark Magician going for the actual fastest way to do this, which is to abandon ice, go to swamp, which you don't need magic to do at all, and after swamp, after you kill Arrghus, you'll get a health refill and a magic refill from defeating Arrghus.
Yeah, it's definitely a much safer way to go about doing this, and saves you the time of farming. You're definitely still losing a lot of time to that kind of mistake, but you can at least minimize it.
Yeah.
Simpoldood looks like he has pulled ahead of Willard here, but I believe that Simpoldood is going to be doing what we call his errands after swamp, like Chris did. I don't believe that he went and did them. So in fact, these runners are still about in the same position they were in before Willard went and took care of that stuff. All right, so meanwhile, Chris is opening up Misery Mire and will be heading in here. The first room of consequence is actually the second room here, which we call Mire 2. And there are some very fast strats here. Unfortunately, Chris doesn't have sword beams, so he doesn't get to use that, but he does have the fire rod, and will be using it to hopefully great effect here. He will get one cycle of Wizrobes, but still a pretty comfortable room for him.
So earlier we were talking about the weird movement mechanics on ice. The movement while swimming is equally strange and tough to get used to. You saw one of the players kind of get stuck against the wall trying to hop out of the water, which is always really annoying when that happens.
Yeah, Willard showing off some of the myriad hazards that ice or swamp, I'm sorry, can throw at you. There's little fireball shooters pretty much everywhere in that dungeon, and they love to do their best to screw you over.
Oh, Dark Magician forgot the switch.
Oh no. Yeah, that's again, I think that's a what am I doing? What am I doing kind of moment, and I've been there, and yeah, it's having a couple mistakes in a row like this is definitely mentally draining for sure.
Simpoldood and Willard still within a few screens of each other.
Yeah, although the lead did change hands back, so Willard, even the errands notwithstanding, has jumped ahead a little bit here in Swamp Palace. Swamp Palace is a pretty there's a lot of movement in Swamp Palace, and he's doing a pretty decent job of it. Unfortunately, those water striders or water tektites or whatever they are giving him kind of annoying positioning in that waterway.
Arrghus is one of the easiest bosses in the Dark World. Certainly the least deadly. He probably should never kill you. Unless Swamp got you by its death from 1,000 paper cuts approach.
Yeah, weirdly, one of the easiest bosses, but one of the most difficult Phase 1 quick kills to learn in the game.
Yeah.
I think somebody was telling me that quick kill can save like 8 seconds, though. I mean, it's a huge time save.
Yeah, it is pretty big.
Meanwhile, Chris showing us the sort of current strats for Vitreous, which I believe were the WQ strats. Unfortunately, he missed the 0 cycle by a bit, but still getting it done relatively quickly. Yeah, with that Vitreous strat, a 0 cycle Vitreous is possible every single time. There's no RNG that would prevent it, but definitely the timing can be a little bit finicky, and your positioning and whether you know how many of the eyeballs you miss with the second and third spins can definitely impact what happens there for you.
So here, Simple will have to go and get his Ether Medallion and Ice Rod. Whereas Willard, already having those items, can go straight into Mire.
So interestingly, simpoldood actually using spin strats on the ladders here rather than the hook dash. It's an interesting choice.
Chris actually showed off one of the newer things in the game there on that Turtle Rock Overworld, where he was able to keep spin speed the whole way through. That in it of itself isn't new, but using the hook shot to double hit squirrels that are in your way is something that's newer.
Yeah, that double hit is pretty powerful. There's a lot of really punishing RNG options for those dead rocks, and being able to forcefully move them out of the way of those passages, even if it makes the following movement a little bit inconvenient, is potentially huge. I wonder if we'll see a medallion speed here.
Yeah, this medallion speed saves like 10 frames or something. I don't go for it personally, but some of the other top players will.
Yeah, it works more or less exactly the same way as the hookshot speed does, and it's game's weird, man. Chris, unfortunately, missing the first hookshot thing, but to avoid the damage there, so he did get 2 bars worth of damage, but got the nice D-boost on the way back. I know Chris likes to go for the Samaria dash strat in the Chain Chomp's room, maybe even more often than is necessary, but it's always fun to see and pretty swag. He did get the fairy as well.
He did go for it. Well,
sometimes you just gotta look cool, you know, and that Samaria dash strat always looks cool. There's a few opportunities to look cool with the Cane of Samaria in this dungeon.
Chris taking it safe on the bottom left Pokey RNG in that room. There's actually a strat where you can kill that Pokey and key dash the door, which is the fastest way to do the room, but it's pretty tricky to do.
That was interesting, actually, using Samaria to hit that switch. I don't think I've ever seen anybody do that, actually. I usually just slash it.
Oh, he actually got the worst Poke 2 pattern by time. It's down left, down left.
Yeah, that full magic drop seems nice, but ultimately doesn't really help him much at all. Because he's gonna get a full magic refill right before the boss anyway. Ooh, and unfortunately getting tagged by the roller there, he just barely missed the iframes off the switch, I think. So Willard also missing the zero cycle, but unfortunately miscounting the arrows that he had shot and switching to the mirror after 7 shots instead of 8, so he had to switch back. But he recognized it and got through it just fine. And again, I don't know anything about doing that, and I've never ever done it.
He actually has a pretty iffy arrow count here. I'm not sure what he's gonna do, or how he's gonna approach this.
Yeah, having missed those arrows in the Circle of Pots room, he's definitely at least 5 arrows behind where he should be right now.
He will get, or he should get Turtle Rock Pot to put him at 7. And then there's a pot you get for free in Ganon's Tower to put him at 12. He still needs more elsewhere. He might get the 10 chest in the room above Ice Arrghus if he thinks about it.
I would be expecting him to pick up both the pot and the chest in that room. Unfortunately, I believe that with those pickups, he will. He still might end up. If he errors on anything, there's a good chance he'll end up needing to finish off Ice Arrghus with the sword, which is never fun.
Also, I missed the entire thing where Darkmagician was doing with the bird, but it seemed like he bombed it and then threw it into the water. It was pretty good.
It's a really interesting political statement on All right, so again, Willard holding just about a dungeon behind Chris, pretty much the whole race, actually. Even in spite of that death to Kholdstare, holding on to that.
I believe Chris is on a 128 pace, which would be one of the better runs in this race thus far. Or in this tournament thus far, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, definitely getting, you know, anywhere reasonably close to your PB in a race setting is pretty hype. You know, these races definitely add some pressure, and you know, a big part of it is how often do you practice doing no reset runs in this format. You know, it's a lot of people get very used to you know, calling the run at the first fatal mistake. And speaking of mistakes, Chris did just open up a door that we don't open. So he has a key short now. There are mitigating things that he can do to make this not a problem, but that is an unfortunate little loss there.
Yeah, and that's just an example. If you play randomizer a lot, it's an easy mistake to make.
You know, the other interesting thing though is that there's definitely, depending on how you exit the little hookshot segment above and what the enemy RNG does, it is actually possible to get kind of shoved over there and accidentally graze the door. We'll have to ask him which of those two things he did. Simpoldood, unfortunately, falling off of the Turtle Rock medallion platform, so he'll be going back up there so that he can open the dungeon. Alright, so Chris coming into two of the most finicky rooms in Ganon's tower outside of the gauntlet itself, which are these two mimic rooms. He's making short work of them. Those are two more rooms that can... one slight movement error and you can end up taking a lot more time in there than you're expecting. They can get away from you very quickly, especially that second one. I think those two mimic rooms and that spike room are often pretty indicative of how practiced somebody's GT is. If they're really, really comfortable with those rooms, they're probably going to have a pretty good gauntlet.
Yeah, and in these gauntlet rooms, they take a lot of practice to get good at. You have to be able to recognize every situation the room can throw at you to be consistently good at it.
Yeah, there are a few strats, especially in this conveyor room and the room below it, that can make it a good bit more consistent, but definitely reading is a huge part of this dungeon in general.
Keep an eye on Willard fighting Trinexx up here. This fight can sometimes go pretty poorly, but it looks like he's got it under control. That blue head has like expert dodging skills.
Yeah, it's pro tier. The blue head is definitely MLG, but yeah, I think again it's one of those fights that's really just about staying in control of it. If you open the fight well, the fight will almost certainly go well. If you open the fight sketchily, then you're in for pain.
Yeah, definitely.
simpoldood, running into a little bit of trouble with this last pokey head. Getting that double spin off on them is not mechanically difficult, but it does require good spacing from them to make it happen. And it's pretty easy to miss, actually, and end up having to chase them around a little bit. They get faster the fewer parts they have, so that last head is really annoying to go chase down.
Yeah, it is. It's especially hard to do the double spin if you're facing them with your sword charge, which I think is what happened to simpoldood there, and he ended up doing a poke spin. That's very easy to do if you're facing them with your sword out.
Okay, Dark Magician, unfortunately, hitting the switch, so he actually has to go back and hit it again. I think he maybe just got the colors back mixed up. But he does get the bomb jump this time, and does so with a nice little sword buffer downward, actually. It's pretty slick.
Christos will be moving on to the Ganon fight with only 3.5 hearts, so little room for error here. Basically no room for error on the first 2 phases. So he'll want to be careful. Dark Magician going for the fairy before Kholdstare. This is a funny route because you end up walking backwards through a lock key door. Or maybe, what is he doing exactly?
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused by what's going on over there. But usually, for anybody who's not aware, this is not a part of the dungeon we would ordinarily see in this particular run. Chris, unfortunately, took a death to Ganon. So I think the high 128 dream is dead, although the sub 130 dream is still alive.
Dark Magician might get blue mail here. It seems like he is going for big key.
I think given some of the things he's been through already in the run, he might just be feeling concerned, you know, and I don't blame him. You know, I know a lot of runners will, you know, take the time in Ganon's tower to go pick up the red mail, but depending on how confident you're feeling going into Kholdstare and then with Mire and Vitreous, you know, it's sometimes better safe than sorry, especially... Oh, and Chris missing the torch glitch.
Oh no, that might stop him from sub 130.
I think it's pretty likely, yeah. He gets a maximum of 2 hits per cycle now. He does have the timing down to get to, but no triples here, and he might have to wait out slightly better RNG for Ganon's warps. That torch glitch is a pretty huge time save. I mean, just last night I actually turned a minute PB into a 17-second one by missing torch glitch. It's no joke time loss.
Yeah.
So Chris is switching to the fire rod to try and, you know, eke out a bit more time, but he does have to be very careful and watch his magic meter. But he's good.
There you got it. And he actually should barely get someone 30 here.
Yeah, he might be just slightly over. The fanfare, I don't think, actually started until, like, from Sword Up. He just got it. All right. Hopefully he... So ChristosOwen has finished first with an official speedracing.tv time of 1:29:58. So just under the buzzer.
Now we have Willard finishing up GT. We'll see if we can get Chris in for any type of interview. Nice Moldorm 2 out of Willard there.
All right, so I think Chris will be joining us shortly to talk about all of this.
Seemed like Willard had a decent Agahnim 2 fight.
Yeah, it's one of those fights that's not terribly difficult, but you're really just at the mercy of the RNG. Some of the patterns are pretty easy, some of them are pretty rough to try and get doubles and triples on, but those blue balls that he throws out when you're trying to stack up on good patterns can just be really, really brutal. All right, and we are joined by ChristosOwen. GG.
Hello! Thank you. That was a funny run.
I like that you barely got to sub 130.
Yeah, I was pushing for sub 130, and then when I died to Ganon and like started missing the 1-on-1, I was like, oh no, it's not gonna be 130.
Yeah, torch glitch.
Yeah, that was my fault. I just stopped pressing the button too early. That wasn't even like lag frames or anything. That was just a big dumb. But I made some pretty big dumbs in this run. Going to the back of Skullwoods without the fire rod was a particular highlight.
Yeah, I may or may not have laughed pretty hard at that one.
I don't think I've ever done it before. Like, no matter what type of ALTTP I'm playing. Opening up the map room during GT as well, I was like, ugh, this is... Why did I do that?
All right, so Dark Magician is actually in the green room. He is not forfeited, so let's see what he's gonna do. Maybe before we bring him in here. I don't know if he's gonna keep racing or not.
Yeah, your opponent. I don't know if he's been chatting in the race channel, but he took an unfortunate death to Kholdstare.
Oof. No, he hasn't said anything, and I wasn't watching. Yeah. Dang. I nearly took a couple deaths. On Arrghus, particularly. I was fighting for my life. Which, I'm sorry Josh, but my swamp was really bad.
I noticed.
I did, however, and I hope you appreciate this. I used the strat on Death Mountain on the way to Turtle Rock that I learned from you like 2 days ago.
I did see it, and I appreciated it deeply.
But yeah, it was my rust showed in spades that the only 2 green splits I had was Escape and Desert Palace. I lost time in every other split.
So really quick, guys, Willard has just finished his Ganon fight. So he has finished his race and is the winner of his race. And he did so with an official speedracing.tv time of 1:35:38, which is pretty good, especially considering that he had a death to Kholdstare. It's pretty awesome. Okay, and also Dark Magician has decided to forfeit his race, so we're gonna get him in for some commentary right now. Hey, what's up, Dark Magician? Sorry that things had to go that way.
Yeah, good game, DM.
Yeah, those type of deaths are the worst.
Yeah, GG.
Yeah, I think that's probably the worst place you can die, nearly.
Oh, it was a bad run before then. I died also to Matio, I think.
Yeah, Moth is...
It was a 32 split for Dark World, or the finished Light World, so yeah, it was bad all around.
Well, I'm sure you didn't do what I did in Agahnim and miss a yellow ball.
Nice.
I didn't even see that. Wow.
Oh, really? The one before, like the penultimate one, I was standing down by the door, and I just hadn't charged my sword enough because I was faffing around, making sounds with the boomerang and poking the door. And then I went to release a spin, and nothing happened, and he just hit me with the yellow.
How many... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so Dark Magician, we definitely, towards the tail end of that run, saw you just kind of taking a minute, a few times. How are you? Was that really just, thinking about what you wanted to do, or, getting up and grabbing some coffee, or what? I've definitely been there with those sort of breathing moments for sure.
Yeah, no, I walked away. It's too much.
Yeah, I think I've definitely been there.
This game is pretty good at doing that.
Yeah, it was just stacking up. I missed the switch in Swamp even, so I mean...
Also, we have Willard in here now. How'd you feel about your run, Willard? And also,
hey.
congrats on the win.
Thank you. Fire Rod is dumb, and I hate it.
Agreed!
I'm so mad that I had to mirror out of Ice Palace and go back in.
Okay, so you didn't die, you mirrored out.
Yeah, well, so I've been doing, like, diagonals to hit the ice, so, like, up right to hit him, and then I cycle back over and up left. I don't know why. Just what I started doing naturally, and of course, for whatever reason, the Fire Rod shot just goes left into the wall, and I immediately mirror out, because I'm like... Which is really frustrating, because I told myself, don't mess this up, and then I messed it up.
Well, clearly you should never tell yourself not to mess something up, because there's a clear correlation now.
Yeah, I was already frustrated, because it's really hard running against a PB with 0 blue balls, and even though I only got 2, I was like, well, I'm 30 seconds behind, and then I missed the hammer jump, because I need to switch to like select buffer or something, because just with my setup currently, pause buffering is just, it's not working for me. Or just get good and do sword buffers.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
I had bufferless hammer jump, and it just failed. And I'm not sure why, because the pixels look correct to me. I had like the fake pixel, where you like walk into the rail.
Chris, did you die twice?
Yeah, they were quick deaths though. I died just after rescuing the old man, and I barely got to his door. And then a boulder killed me, and I died again.
Oh, dang. That's rough. Ganon gave me an interesting phase 2 that I think I did as well as I could with it. So, yeah, overall, I was pretty okay with this run. I was really nervous going into it just because there was a lot on the line with this race. So, grabbing that win means I'm still alive for a little bit longer. Just got to race Pika Pals sometime soonish. And then,
Ooh, that's going to be a good match.
Yeah. At this rate, if I play like this, there's no way I'm going to win.
This game's like a lottery. One game you can play fantastic, and then you go into another run, and just everything goes wrong.
Exactly. Like last night, I did a run, and I got a casual 130, like high 132, and I was like, yeah, no problem. I had 10 blue balls too, so whatever. And then just that I need to figure out a different way to do the fire rod there, because that's always the reason I do diagonals is because someone was like, yeah, as soon as you fall down, just do upright, and then you won't ever shoot, because I used to accidentally shoot the first fire rod shot to the right, and then I accidentally shot it to the left. So I'm like, all right, that makes sense.
I go like upright into just holding up after that.
Yeah.
But I made it like, so my trouble with the fire rod is I got the big key in the Skullwoods and then tried to go to Mothula without going back to the big chest first. And then I got outside and tried to pause to the fire rod and equip the lamp, and I was like, wait a minute. And then because I'd already picked up the pot key, like I would normally do the bonk strat for the bomb jump, but I couldn't have done that because I would have unlocked the door.
Yeah. Oh, I got grabbed by the Wallmaster grabbing that pot key like an idiot. I even like saw it coming. I was like, this is about to happen. Don't do it. And then I immediately did it. It's like, don't slash at the beetle. There's knockback. But it was too late. It was already happening.
Yeah, the hands override the brain a lot. It happens.
But other than that, I was actually watching along quite a bit. I was like, oh, if I can keep up to Chris, then I'll be feeling a little good. And then
Yeah, you were pretty consistently about a dungeon behind almost the entire run once we got into Dark World. And you held it despite that little incident in ice, so it was pretty impressive.
Thank you.
I'm embarrassed that you watched.
I turned it on right after I messed up Kholdstare, and I see Dark Magician doing it too, and I'm like, what happened? I just see you standing there with the cape out. Or not the cape, you're just standing up at the top, getting hit by icicles. I'm like, oh no, Dark Magician, did you do the same? Did the same thing happen to you, or what happened?
I just missed the last shot. I usually go 7, and then I stand up against the wall and shoot the 8th one down. That way the ice crystals can't mess with me, but I shot up instead of down.
Oh,
but
man.
I shot up instead of down, so.
That sucks.
Yep.
Well, GG's.
When is Bombos going to be routed in?
Can we just do like one overworld glitch to go get bombos? Like just one. That's the only thing I ask for. Is just one.
Willard, no.
Overworld glitch right there. And then no other time. Just that one time would be great.
Willard J Cheatley.
Full
effect.
I'm gonna write my own LTTP route, and then I'll never play it.
I'll take the clip into GT. Thank you very much with my one.
Yeah, that'd be good too.
I guess
I will run Willard %. That seems like a good run.
That sounds terrible. It's just gonna devolve once you cheat. Once you do an overworld glitch once, it's hard not to just keep doing it. So
the game is so fun with glitches.
It really is.
For anyone who hasn't watched, there's a category called All Dungeons, which uses the majority of glitches, and it's extremely fun.
We have
really quick.
simpoldood finishing, yeah.
Yeah, it's official time on Speed Racing TVA 1:44:27. So GG to simpoldood. Also, Dark Magician, I did not know that you could throw some Maria blocks onto the little pad landing spots and have it create a pad. I saw you do that a few minutes ago, and I was like, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's really finicky though. It has to land right where it says the question mark.
Yeah, that's crazy. Game is weird, man. Game's weird.
Yeah, I'm gonna bail out here. Thank you guys for commentating, and you guys for racing.
Thanks for the
Cool.
Chris. Have a good day.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Have a good one.
Catch you later.
GG.
So
Are we
I
gonna
saw
try to
Simpledude
get-
was pretty close behind me in T-Rock. Did he take a depth at Trinexx or something, or Laser Bridge?
I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, so I think what happened was, I think he actually caught up to you quite a bit. You guys were neck and neck actually during the White World. You were actually trading back and forth a little bit in Swamp, and I think some of the later dungeons, I think you were just generally faster in. Is really what it came down to. But your mirror out of ice was definitely when he, kind of caught up big time for sure.
That's a hard one to come back from. Oh, apparently you ran out of magic on Trinexx. I was tempted to not go for the backdoor strat on Trinexx because I've been messing it up lately, but I'm like, he's right on my tail. I need to retain this lead. So I did it anyway, and everything worked out, thankfully. And then, just a lot of little things I need to clean up throughout the run and not mess up Kholdstare. I always seem to mess up at least one thing every race. I'm just glad it wasn't Ganon, though my Ganon was really sloppy. I froze him like 3 or 4 times, and I was getting only 2 hits per cycle. It was gross.
Yeah, interestingly, both you and Chris actually missed the 0 cycle on Vitreous, which is always fun.
Yeah, I decided to go for another spin because I had the health to do it. And then, of course, trying to mash those arrows out to get the 8 into them, and somehow I stopped too early, and then I almost get a Vitreous eyeball to the head.
Yeah, it's really easy to count button presses instead of actual arrow shots, and the number of times I've switched to mirror on 7 is more than I would care to admit to, for sure.
Yeah, I need to learn to not mash and actually time it well enough or something. Mashing seems to be hit or miss sometimes with arrows. But I'm gonna head out. GG's everybody. Thank you guys for commentating. Hope you guys had fun.
Yep, have a good one, Willard.
I'm out too. GG.
Well, thanks a lot, Dark, and GG again for sticking through it for as long as you did.
Thanks.
I guess we should figure out what the speaking schedule is.
Yeah, I was just pulling that up now. Let's see what we've got here. There are a few things going on for the remainder of the day. It looks like there are a few races on various channels for the Ori and the Blind Forest tournament. We do have some Super Mario Sunshine and Final Fantasy tournament stuff, but there is more NMG tournament action coming up later tonight, I believe at 8 p.m. Eastern, which will be on, looks like Speed Gaming 3, I think, for your viewing pleasure.
Yeah, I will actually be commentating the Metatron Checks Human with Greenhand. Should be a fun match.
Yeah, that's a good one, and it looks like the other half of that 4-way is Louis and Cransoon. Cransoon, I think, he made a lot of time progress a little while ago. I'm not sure how practiced he is right now on NMG, but that could be an interesting race as well.
Yeah, and Louis is also, I guess, a newer runner to the game who has a lot of the records in SMW, including the record in 96 Exit. And he's been getting really good at A Link to the Past. He has a 127 now. So yeah.
Yeah,
One
this
of
game has
those-
gotten really interesting. We've got some new players who are making a lot of progress really, really quickly. I think we have to give a shout out to all the community members who put together some amazing resources, especially perhaps the practice hack that we all have access to now, which has made grinding out rooms and bosses just 1,000 times more convenient than it used to be.
Yes, definitely. I guess we will sign off for now. I want to thank our racers for putting on a great show, and thank you, Emo, for commentating with me.
And likewise to you.
And thanks to the tournament organizers and Speed Gaming for hosting and restreaming our races. Thank y'all.
And shoutouts to Chris for always going on to his actual camera at the end of these races while he's still being restreamed. GG.
Always so good.